Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyanan Gana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. I want to get on right with the verse because we lost some time. We're in chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge, text 32. Mam hipartha vyapashritya yepishu papayonayaha striyo vaishyas tata shudras tepi yanti parangatim. Let's see. No, we'll go word for word first. Mam of me. He certainly. Partha, O son of Prita. Vyapasritya, particularly taking shelter. Yea, those who. Api, also. Syu, are. Papayona yaha, born of a lower family. Striya, women. Vaishya, mercantile people. Tata, also. Shudra, lower class men. Te api, even they. Yanti, go. Parang, to the supreme gatim, destination. Mam hipartha vyapashritya ye pisyu papayonaya striyo vaishyas tata shudras te piyanti parangatim. All right. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, Shudras, workers, can attain the supreme destination. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, Shudras, workers, can attain the supreme destination. Srila Prabhupada's purport. It is clearly declared here by the Supreme Lord that in devotional service there is no distinction between the lower and higher classes of people. In the material conception of life, there are such divisions, but for a person engaged in transcendental devotional service to the Lord, there are not. Everyone is eligible for the supreme destination. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 4, Text 18, it is said that even the lowest, who are called chandalas, dog-eaters, can be purified by association with a pure devotee. Therefore, devotional service and the guidance of a pure devotee are so strong that there is no discrimination between the lower and higher classes of men. Anyone can take to it. The most simple man taking shelter of the pure devotee can be purified by proper guidance. According to the different modes of material nature, men are classified in the mode of goodness, brahmanas, the mode of passion, kshatriyas or administrators, the mixed mode of passion and ignorance, vaishyas or merchants, and the mode of ignorance, shudras or workers. Those lower than them are called chandalas, and they are born in sinful families. Generally, the association of those born in sinful families is not accepted by the higher classes. But the process of devotional service is so strong that the pure devotee of the Supreme Lord can enable people of all lower classes to attain the highest perfection of life. This is possible only when one takes shelter of Krishna as indicated here by the word vipasritya, one has to take shelter completely of Krishna. Then one can be much greater than great jnanis and yogis. Again, O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, and Shudras, Vaishyas, merchants, and Sudras, workers, can attain the supreme destination. So Krishna is working towards the conclusion of this chapter, the most confidential knowledge, and just pointing out the entirely transcendental situation of Krishna consciousness, of pure devotional service to the Lord. There's no limitation as to who can be eligible, but each individual must make himself eligible by surrender, as it says here. And it lists the different modes of nature and those who are within the Varnashram system who are associated with those modes of nature. And then it talks about the lower, the even lower births, Chandalas and Mlechas, Yavanas. There are many derogatory terms for those who are below or outside of the Varnashram system. As it said, those born in sinful families. Srila Prabhupada said that you have all, he was addressing us early on, mostly Americans and Canadians. He said, you have all come from Mlechas and Yavanas, meaning very low-born, low families. He says, but by this process of Krishna consciousness, you can become more than Brahmanas. And that is the transcendental nature of devotional service. The point is made here that the most simple man, and this doesn't necessarily mean a sinful man. This might be someone in the mode of goodness or passion or just a very simple man, not a towering intellect or great at anything in particular, but just a simple, humble man, by taking shelter of the pure devotee, can be purified by the guidance of that pure devotee. And that is the key, is the association of devotees. Once we hear and have become attracted to Krishna consciousness, to consciousness, awareness of the absolute truth, awareness of the actual nature of our very being, there is a point at which we cannot move any further without the association of devotees, and specifically by the acceptance of spiritual masters. Now, of a spiritual master, but also spiritual masters. There's Diksha Guru is the guru, the spiritual master who accepts the disciple as the disciple accepts him for initiation. But Siksha Guru, we can all be Siksha Gurus to each other. And in fact, we are in a place like this, the association of like-minded souls who are interested in developing pure devotional service, are working towards that and endeavoring to take what is really a simple process and try try to progress through it. We say it's a simple process, but also, as we well know, generally speaking, it's not easy. It may be simple, but that's different than being easy. It's not easy. It involves surrender. It involves giving up the knot in the heart that is rebellious against the supremacy of the Lord. That's why we're here in the first place, is because we have the jiva who has avoided the service of Krishna, or who has, by avoiding or by being distracted from that, we come into this world, and then we become forgetful. We forget what we are. We have forgotten. We're eternal servants of the Lord. We're eternal parts and parcels, but you forget that. Because we, trying to remember the term exactly, simple word. We allowed ourselves to be distracted by Maya, by the illusory energy, and here we are. So the way to, here we are trying to enjoy without Krishna, without that service, and without serving him, without functioning according to our very constitution. Our constitution is service. Our constitution is loving Krishna. That's really what we're made out of. And so that's what once we become aware of that and we accept the Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, and try to accord ourselves with that reality and with the Lord's will, the more we can progress in that path, then we return back home, back to Godhead. That I hear quite often devotees saying, we go back home, back to Godhead in this life. Yes, but that's a state of consciousness also. We have to understand, because Krishna may have other plans. He may wish for us to be here, to associate, to give association to each other. And we may take birth again, even though we've become quite purified. But it's not up to us. We simply pursue pure devotional service. And for myself, I believe for almost everyone, that involves our routine practices. We have prescriptions: chant 16 rounds, stay clean, rise early, attend the temple programs, associate with devotees, study the Shastra and literatures and pursuance, authorized literatures and pursuance, and serve the devotees. Those are prescriptions. And there are proscriptions, meaning don't eat meat. Don't have sex outside of marriage. Don't use intoxicants. And don't gamble. Gambling also includes speculation, much excessive speculation about elements of philosophy that are not really key or essential. And we can waste a lot of time thinking, let's see, I can't even I can't speculate as to come up with a speculation. But beyond that, of course, the jnanis are, that is their reason for being, is speculating about the absolute truth. And they come up with all kinds of different theories, basically they end up in in nowhere land, in Neverland. Brahman realization is as far as they can possibly reach, and actually very few of them reach that point, and then they fall again away from that. Let me just take a glance here quickly. This verse is always, at least in America, has always been a bit of a minefield because it throws women into the lower birth category. I've always had an issue with the punctuation that defining women Vaishyas and Shudras as lower births when it can also appear from a reading of the Sanskrit that the lower birth refers to the Chandalas, the dog eaters, the Mlecchas, Yavanas, etc. But the way it reads here, yes. And what does that mean? That women are included in as a lower birth. There are so many answers that are possible. There's the business I was just seeing on the in the book room, where they have the videos of Srila Prabhupada playing. He was giving a lecture, and I just happened to catch as I walked by last night. Supposedly men have a brain that's so much bigger than women on average. And I know I worked for 11 or 12 years as a distribution manager of the BBT in Los Angeles. And all of the most reliable people that worked in the BBT, frankly, were the ladies. So it's not, to me, it's always been not a question of quantity but quality. In other words, if you can have a huge brain and not use very much of it. You can have a moderate-sized brain and use a whole lot of it, and that's what we strive to do, is use what we have in the service of Krishna. I didn't have a chance to prepare, by the way, for this class. Are there any comments? Does anyone want to expand on anything or ask any questions? Yes.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the short notice class. You were just talking about gambling, and when we think of gambling, it doesn't seem to be one of the most important regulations. We sort of, illicit sex, we sort of focus on, that's a hard one, and the other non-eating things. But no gambling, we have to think like poker or dice,
right,
things like that. But there's a lot to this no gambling thing, like you were saying. It seems like not following the regulated principles is itself gambling. And it's not reading Prabhupada's books, is taking a big gamble, with our spiritual life and that. So could you say some more about this gambling propensity that we have to take our life cheaply in some ways? It's a big gamble then.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada said, again, this was early on, and he was addressing probably a room full of Americans and Canadians. He said, in effect, he said, I don't remember the exact words, but in effect, he said the problem that you have is that, and he said, that you boys and girls do not sufficiently fear Maya. You're not afraid sufficiently of the sufferings that you face in the material world, that you will face. Of course, at that time, most of the devotees were in their late teens or maybe 20s, and they didn't even think. I was a little bit older, but there were some older than I. We didn't think in terms of 40, 50 years down the road. We didn't think in terms that Srila Prabhupada would ever leave us. We just couldn't bring ourselves to think in terms of that. But at the same time, what you say is really important in that we have a limited amount of time. We don't know when death will come calling, the death of this body. And you can say, oh, well, we know better, we don't fear death. We may not fear it, but we don't know what it is. We don't remember the experience. And it is terrifying to suddenly, if you've been in a body for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, suddenly it's, even if you have some warning, you're still at that moment, at those moments, that process is, it could be scary. It's not that we live our lives fearing it. I hear devotees say, oh, they look forward to it because they can go on to something better. Well, you better hope, because we don't know at any moment. We don't know how much of our of the reactions to our past sinful activities Krishna is going to allow us to suffer, and to what extent. We just can't know. In this lifetime, we're guaranteed a human birth simply by chanting Hare Krishna. As long as we don't commit Vaishnava aparad or Guru aparad, then other factors, that can be another factor that can affect. But generally by chanting and going through our routine process, at the very least, we're guaranteed another human birth, and ideally not. Ideally, we could actually go home back to Godhead, but we have to be serious serious but joyous in pursuing our Krishna consciousness, in our sadhana, in our routine practices, as I mentioned earlier. It can come at any moment. I know of several devotees, and some of you probably know of them too, who have died in sudden circumstances, and can happen to any of us.
Thank you.
But that factor of not being sufficiently afraid of Maya, really, what does that mean? It means that we're a little bit too comfortable with Maya. We're a little bit too comfortable here. Fortunately, we have prasadam, so we can get comfortable with prasadam. We can get comfortable in the association of devotees, even though it's, we're here in our material bodies and we're associating together with material words, mind, and such. But that's all right. That's of great value. But we can get also lazy, comfortable with material, with our material situation, and it's understandable, and it's probably common in everyone's life to some degree, whether I recognize it or not. But we should be very cautious that we are paying close attention to our consciousness in terms of what are we desiring.
Thank you, Padre.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't understand. In the beginning you spoke about how in the Bhagavad-Gita and some of the times in the Bhagavad-Gita, they put the woman always near to the Shudras or the cows, etc. And I don't have the explanation, because we can see there are many types of women, like there are many types of men. I've met women who are highly intellectual, much more than men, and good at managing and good. So the different qualities, how is that putting men in the same bag? So I still don't understand why is that done.
It's difficult because, quite frankly, my perception is that it's not universally applicable. These concepts aren't universally applicable in this age. One time, a friend of mine, who's a longtime devotee, and has done a lot of wonderful service, and we were close friends back years ago. We've been kind of drifted apart, but he wanted to take an intelligence test. He wanted to challenge me to do this. So then we got our wives involved as well. So we went and took there's this Mensa Society, which is supposedly the top 2% in terms of IQ, which is basically a material measurement. But in any event, so we went, and the four of us went one day to USC, University of Southern California, Los Angeles, for this test. There were about 40 people there. Anyway, the end result was my wife beat us all.
Your wife beat?
My wife beat all of us. She had a higher IQ score than me, or this friend and his wife. So it's not. There's different natural inclinations, and so it's in the West, much of this feminist movement is rejecting the natural inclinations of both women and men. Generally, women are interested in security, are interested in family, and men are more. They're more interested in making it in the world. They're much more competitive, and but it's a perfect fit. And that's why, well, it's a perfect fit in the right circumstances, in the right situation, which the whole scheme in the Vedas, in the Varnashram system, the whole scheme is that the compatibility is confirmed, for instance, before a marriage, because divorce is unheard of nowadays, and even ISKCON had early problems with that because of just people not thinking things through, acting based on their senses, not taking a sober look. I was fortunate. I took a sober look at a girl, a brahmacharini, and she was very smart and very hardworking. And like I said, she beat all of us in the IQ test, and we've been married for almost 46 years. So it does require there were many complaints early on, and still from time to time there are, regarding or complaints about women. And Prabhupada was once I forget which temple it was, but they wanted to. The president of the temple had written in saying that men were so upset by the presence of the ladies, so agitated, that he was wondering about maybe creating a separate temple for the women. And Srila Prabhupada's response, I don't remember the exact statements of the president's letter, but Srila Prabhupada's response was very much in keeping with this verse, that in spiritual life we don't distinguish here. We're talking jiva souls. And if the men are so agitated, then they can go to the forest. That was Prabhupada's response, so.
So do you think maybe it was applicable in Satya Yuga or other yugas, but in Kali Yuga you can't say that women are inferior to men in general ways?
Superior, inferior it's all relative. We're in the relative world. Women have certain strengths that men don't have, and vice versa. In the Kali Yuga, yeah, it's really jumbled up, and it will get worse. Ideally, from now until the end of the golden age of Lord Chaitanya, 9,500 years down the road, things will get better in that regard and make more sense. But ultimately, it's just it's a very degraded chaos, confusion, the age of hypocrisy, and a lot of the standards. Just you have to look at them, understand their proper place, but then you make adjustments according to time, place, and circumstance. I think that applies to many aspects. We see that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati even had brahmacharinis. That was unheard of. I don't believe he didn't have direct darshan so much, but there was facility for ladies who, in Bhakti Vikash Maharaj's book, he on Bhaktisiddhanta's life, he mentions that there were some separate facilities for women whose families were totally against devotional service, were who had no place to turn, and in terms of being devotees. And so, and then Srila Prabhupada also, and he was criticized even by his own godbrothers who had seen the example of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So Srila Prabhupada also, of course, brahmacharinis, brahmacharis, even householders living in the temples early on. Some of the temples had facility, others didn't, and so the householders who lived in the temples were, the husband is in the brahmachari ashram, and the wife's in the brahmacharini ashram. But again, Srila Prabhupada made many exceptions, giving a Brahman initiation to girls. And some of the early girls, Shilavati, Yamuna, they were so highly qualified that there would be even today. Today there would be no doubt that they're highly qualified and Brahminical. Anything? Any corrections? I have to ask that. All right. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the assembled devotees. Jai Krishna.